Hello, good afternoon everyone. Welcome to Sheffield Town Hall and thank you for attending the Co-operative Executive meeting this afternoon. My name is Councillor Julie Grocott and I will be chairing the meeting today. This meeting is open to the public and although there is a reduced room capacity to ensure COVID-secure environment and that social distancing is properly observed, the meeting will be webcast live and the recording will also be available for people to view later through the Council's website. As a result of the reduced room capacity, we have a member of the public who is asking a question and report authors who are presenting items today that are observing the meeting on a screen in the reception room. They will be invited into the chamber for their individual items. This may mean that there will be a short pause in between these items to allow them to make their way into the room. I therefore ask for your patience to allow this to be managed safely. Please can I request that mobile telephones and other such equipment are switched off to silent mode so as not to disturb the conduct of the meeting. There are no fire tests planned today. If there is an emergency evacuation, please take instructions from the Town Hall staff. The assembly point is Tudor Square. Can I now ask each cooperative executive member in turn to introduce themselves, please? And we will start with Councillor Turpin.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Paul Turpin, Executive Member for Inclusive Economy, Jobs and Skills.
Thank you. Councillor Teal.
Thank you, Chair. Alison Teal, Councillor for Netheredge and Sharrow, Executive Member for Sustainable Neighbourhoods, Wellbeing Parks and Leisure.
It doesn't get any shorter, does it? Councillor Dunn.
Councillor Jane Dunn, Member for Education, Children and Families.
Councillor MacDonald.
Good afternoon, Kate MacDonald. I'm a councillor for Gleadless Valley and I'm the Executive Member for Finance and Resources.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Councillor Douglas Johnson, City Ward and Cabinet Executive Member for Climate Change, Environment and Transport.
And Councillor Linders Hammond.
Hi, I'm George. I'm a councillor for Hillsborough Ward and I'm Executive Member for Health and Social Care.
Thank you, everyone. You've also noticed that we have a number of officers in the room, so I'll go around and let the officers introduce themselves as well, please.
Kate Josephs, Chief Executive.
Gillian Duckworth, Director of Legal and Governance.
John McElraith, Executive Director, People Services.
Eugene Walker, Executive Director, Resources. Crofts, Executive Director, Place Portfolio.
Abby Brownsword, Principal Committee Secretary.
Apologies for absence this afternoon. We have apologies from Councillors Terry Fox, Mazza Iqbal and Councillor Paul Wood. Item 3 on the agenda is the exclusion of public and press. Please note that at item 3 on the agenda, item 15 on the agenda, there is an appendix which is not available for the public or press because it contains exempt information. If members wish to discuss this information in the appendix, I will ask for the members of the press and public to kindly leave for that part of the meeting and we will halt the webcast. So can members please bear that in mind when we get to that item on the agenda, please. Item 4 is declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations, please? Item 5 is minutes of the previous meeting. Can members approve of the meeting minutes as a correct record of the Cooperative Executive meeting held on the 19th of May and the 9th of June 2021, please? All happy? Excellent, thank you. Item 6 is public questions and petitions. We just have one public question from Charlie Wilkinson on behalf of the Vaccine for All campaign. Charlie, you're very welcome. Please ask your question.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm Charlie Wilkinson. I'm a medical student and I'm here on behalf of Medac Sheffield. And the question we would like to ask is, MEDAC Sheffield is asking for Sheffield City Council to become a signatory of the Vaccine for All campaign, which seeks to ensure access to coronavirus vaccines for everyone with particular regard to those with insecure immigration status, for example, no proof of address or ID, or those not registered with GP surgeries. Other signatories so far include Sheffield's Director of Public Health, Greg Fell, and over 350 NGOs, Royal Colleges, unions, and other UK councils, including Bristol City, Oxford City, and Newcastle City, among others. We also ask, in addition to becoming a signatory, that the Council offer a public statement of support for the campaign, review data collection and sharing arrangements at COVID-19 testing and vaccine centres, which can make people fearful to come forward due to the ongoing practice of healthcare information being used by the Home Office to target individuals, to review the implementation of ID checks at COVID-19 testing and vaccine centres, which contributes to the issue above and in and of itself provides a significant barrier to access. And to share good practice resources with local stakeholders about how to ensure everyone can access the vaccine without fear, including the Doctors of the World briefing and the Royal College of GPs Vaccine Inequality Toolkit. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. It actually falls into my portfolio, so it's my responsibility to answer the question, Charlie. The vaccination programme has been a massive undertaking, and our NHS colleagues have been doing and continue to do a great job at the mammoth task of vaccinating our city. The good news is that we are the top of the core cities with the proportion of adults that have been vaccinated for their first and second dose in Sheffield. From the beginning of the programme, a range of partners have been working to support the programme, including the voluntary community and faith sector, working on engagement and communications with other communities to answer queries, concerns, so that people can access the vaccination appointments. As a council, we've been supporting the NHS colleagues with logistics support, which has ranged from gritting in the winter, signage to providing extra stewards. We've also been working with the NHS to make sure that some of our most vulnerable groups in the city can access vaccination, including, for example, working so that the Devonshire Green GP could deliver vaccinations at the Archer project at the Cathedral. We are pleased to add our support to the Vaccines for All campaign, which emphasises that extra action must be taken to make sure that the vaccine is available to everyone and to support the asks that are being made in it. We have added our signature to the website. We know that people who are not registered with the GP will not be invited for vaccinations through a text message, but they can attend appointments and be vaccinated. This is more straightforward at a site which offers drop-in appointments. At the moment, these are at Darnell and at the Octagon Centre, as well as a number of pop-in clinics that have been held in local areas and advertised as drop-ins. Staff are aware that people who aren't registered at a GP or with an NHS number can attend, and we really want the NHS colleagues to vaccinate them. We recognise that our usual communication methods may not be the most effective to tell people that they can still be vaccinated, even without GP registration or NHS number. So we are working with the Clinical Commissioning Group to consider how best to get the message out there. With the pop-up clinics, we will also work with the NHS to publicise them to the appropriate local community groups and organisations, and we will continue to do this as long and as often as we need to let people know how to find the easiest location to drop in. I hope that answers your question. Thank you very much for attending today, Charlie. We do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That did answer my question. Thank you.
Item 7 on the agenda is items called in for scrutiny. Can we all note, please, that there have been no items called in for scrutiny since our last meeting. Then moving on to item 8, which is another good news story for lots of people. It's in relation to staff retirements. The report at item 8 provides details of 32 members of staff who have recently retired from the council with over 20 years service. On behalf of the cooperative executive of the council, I would like to thank them for their work and dedication to the city and wish them all the very best for the future and a long and happy retirement. And can we also make sure that the appropriate extract from the Cabinet resolution under the common seal of the Council is forwarded to them? Well done everyone who's retired. Can I say, Greg Fell, that is magnificent timing. You have walked in just in time for item 9, which is the Sheffield Local Outbreak Control Plan, which I understand you're going to be discussing with us this afternoon. Welcome, Greg, and thank you.
I'll turn that on. Thanks, Councillor Crowcock. Thanks all. So I'll be quick with this. The paper is fairly short, and I'll just do a very brief intro and summary. We as a council are required to have an outbreak control plan. It was one of the requirements of the COMF grant, the Contain Outbreak Management Fund grant. We've had one since April, May 2020, largely a reflection of what was already going on, but was formalised and put into a plan from then. The plan then covered all of the right bases in terms of the city's response to COVID-19 at that time, from prevent through testing, tracing, isolating, support to the vulnerable. We stood up basically a mini version of Public Health England and NHS Test and Trace, which has been operational now for a long time and has done all the things required of it. We've added to that as more tools have become available to us, and as the situation has changed. So most obviously, vaccination became available from about January this year to 2020, and variants of concern have become more of a concern from early on this year. So we've kind of added to the plan. An ask of government in March this year was that all upper-tier local authorities review their outbreak control plan, and we've duly done that. Been a reasonably thorough job. Thank you to Lorraine Mitchell in particular, who's done that in my team. The revised plan is there within the papers. It's deliberately fairly short and fairly high level. The brevity is there quite deliberately, because the plan is fluid and does keep changing as the situation changes. I'm happy that the plan as is does all of the things that are necessary of it, and basically the asks of the cooperative exec are to note the update, to approve the plan as is, note the DPH responsibilities in terms of executing and implementing the plan, note that we will need to keep looking at this as the situation changes and as we get into the next financial year, because currently we know that COMF, the thing that funds much of this activity, is secure until the end of this financial year, but we don't know what happens next financial year yet, and so we'll note the need to continue to review that as we go forward. And I shall stop there.
Thank you, Greg. Councillor Dunn, you have...
Thank you, Greg, and thanks for all the work that you've done. I'm going to relate to page 44, where you mentioned schools, and obviously that's in my remit, and I know that you've worked really, really hard, and you know, the schools really do appreciate. There's been quite a lot of publicity recently, and it was on Look North last night, about the problem that some of the schools in the sixth form and the senior schools, with the delta that so many children are ending up having to self-isolate. We're coming to a very crucial time in the education calendar, you know, where kids have been working the whole of their academic life towards getting these exams, and yet now they may end up in a position where that could be threatened. I know that you're doing everything you can regarding, you know, supporting schools through this. Is there, and that we are on green, and I've been approached by teachers, by the unions and by concerned parents about what more do you think that the government could do to make sure that kids can get to the point where they can take their exams, their assessments, and that their futures won't be compromised, you know, just through this very crucial time when we've got a really big rise in the variant, and we know that people aren't getting seriously ill, but it still means they're going to miss their school. So the question I've been asked is, it's great that we're green, but that won't stop children having to miss. Do you think schools, in your opinion, or is there anything we can do as a city to write to say that we'd like a little bit of extra protection in certain, you know, year groups? I mean, I've been asked to ask this question, and that's my job to do that. So I'm just really, really, really keen that our kids don't have another years of exams messed up more than anything for the sake of a little bit extra being done for a few weeks.
Thanks, Councillor Dunn. A few thoughts. One, it's probably best for me not to comment on what schools might be able to do educationally around alternative arrangements for exams, because it's well beyond my area of competence and expertise. I would hope that some thought is being given to that, but I don't know the specifics. It's on the school's response to COVID has been nothing short of amazing. School heads and teachers and the whole school communities have genuinely done a fabulous job there. Early on, we asked schools to take on responsibility for managing bubbles and managing contact tracing, because only the teachers know who's been sat next to who. It's difficult for an outsider to get underneath that, and schools have done a genuinely good job in that, and making schools as COVID secure as is possible. It's worth saying that COVID secure doesn't mean absolutely safe. That's patently apparent, but it does mean risk mitigated, and schools have done a great job on that one. The Delta variant is more transmissible, and we're seeing almost all of the cases we're seeing at the moment is in secondary school age children and adults under 35. Oddly not primary school age children. I genuinely don't know why that is. There's one or two, but in the main it's secondary school age. Broadly, we want kids to be in school for all of the reasons you've outlined. School is good for kids. So as you bring bubbles and people together, there will be some transmission, it's difficult to it's difficult to think of what schools or ourselves might be doing that we aren't doing, and schools are trying to manage the balance of risk mitigation transmission wise with maintaining as normal an education as possible, and schools, along with my team, make every effort when there is a case to send home as few kids as possible. So there's a very, very careful process of risk calibration. Who's been sat next to who, and how has that worked in the school, because we want to send home as few kids as possible. So it's difficult to know what we could be doing that we aren't doing, actually. I probably, if I had to say one thing, I'd probably go back a little bit on face coverings in schools for the remainder of this term, but that is a question that the Secretary of State for Education is very, very clear on. We need to seek permission from the national goal structure to do that, and I may go back there, but that in itself wouldn't be the single panacea, but it would help a little bit.
I just want to clarify, I wasn't asking you what schools should do. It was more on the, you know, like what you just mentioned about the face covering. Thank you very much for that. Will you be keeping, obviously, a really close eye on this rate as we get nearer the exam period and assessment period? So will there be communication? Will that be stepped up by yourselves in this crucial time, so that we could maybe communicate quite quickly? Do you know what I mean? I'm just making sure that the pathway, I know it's there, but I think, you know, just because it's a very, very fast-moving situation.
In short, yes. My team are in regular contact with heads up and down the city on a daily basis, usually in the context of specific incidents, and from time to time I get wheeled out to do all head teachers briefings, and the heads are in constant contact with us, and yes, we do keep in regular touch, at least weekly, usually more frequently than that.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Linders-Hammond and then Councillor MacDonald with questions.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Greg, for this report. And not only the great thank you to your team for the work putting this together, refreshing this, but also it's really clear from the actions within it. It is so many officers of this council and in our partners who, whose role it is to implement this. And I can see in terms of care homes and trying to enable visiting and things, as well as keeping it in safe. I just wanted to wonder whether you shared my concern that, as welcome as it would be to all of us when formal restrictions are are finally gone, as our Prime Minister would like to have relatively soon, whether it might make implementing elements of this plan, which officers have done really strongly over the last year or more challenging as we lose that more formal relationship with rules, whether it be social distancing, masks, or a number of other things that we have to try and implement. And anything, have you got any thoughts on ways we can kind of mitigate the challenges that the return to full normality, as the government would like us to move to, will have? Any thoughts on that would be very welcome. Thank you.
A few quick thoughts. Summer for the public health team, be that Big P, Big H, or as you say, the much wider group of people who stood up the response here, will be a balance of managing individual outbreaks, be they in schools, be they in care homes, be they in other places. And note there are very few outbreaks in care homes at the moment. I think there is one, but that's the exception rather than the rule. So managing incidents and managing contact tracing, ensuring that people do get tested if they've got symptoms and that kind of thing. So to reduce cases insofar as is possible, government, and I think rightly, clearly want to return to some semblance of normality. So we'll be in this tricky space of cases, which are people with symptoms who get a positive test result, most of whom at the moment are pretty well. There are vanishingly few people admitted to hospital at the moment, and long may that continue. So managing cases, which are basically people with a positive test, with the harm that comes from cases, most obviously hospitalisation and death, which, as I say, at the moment is vanishingly few. And in, say, the northwest of England, where they're a month ahead of us in terms of the rise of the Delta variant, still relatively little hospitalisation, actually. So managing cases versus the harm that come from cases, with the social and economic consequences of blunt measures to control cases. I think that will become the business of the summer and the autumn, that will probably get us into a space where we're in good shape for what happens in autumn and winter, where we all go back inside and coronaviruses tend to be seasonal. So we're uncertain how autumn and winter will play out. 2 or 3 months ago, the Chief Medical Officer and SAGE were predicting an autumn wave, which would be consistent with what the epidemiology was telling us, but Delta has obviously taken that over and accelerated that forward by a few months. So it might be that we won't see much further harm. I suspect it won't be that it will be that we won't see much further harm. Add into that the speed of the vaccination programme, which is nothing short of astonishing. I think we're going to get into the space where we'll probably be able to have something akin to normality once the vaccination programme has been fully complete. If I had to guess, I think requirements on social distancing will be slowly down-traded. Masks will probably remain for a while. I don't know how long masks will remain for. The recommendations on the key recommendation on vaccination, and if you have symptoms, get a test, will remain for the foreseeable future, I suspect.
Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the plan, Greg. I'm happy to support the recommendations, and I'd like to add my thanks to you and your team for all the work that you've been doing. I'd just like a bit of an update on the track and trace stuff, because the NHS stuff has been, ridiculed nationally and discredited. I just wondered now that where there are, obviously, thankfully, fewer incidences, whether or not they've managed to improve their performance, and in fact, how that compares with the innovative approach that we've adopted locally.
So NHS Track and Trace has been working much better in the latter phases of its operation than the early phases, and that much is patently clear from the data. I think it's fair to say that we are now fully responsible for contact tracing for cases, but not contacts of cases, and that may come. We were considering the idea of taking on the full gamut of NHS test and trace as a pilot, but without the resourcing. And what held us back was actually the resourcing and the exit strategy from it. So, but for now, we are doing what's known as the local zero pilot, where we are responsible for following up cases, not contacts of cases. And what we're finding is that our completion, i.e. the proportion of people that we're able to, proportion of people with a positive test that we're able to find, contact, give advice and do welfare checks for, which weren't, isn't happening in the national system, is well north of 90% within 24 to 48 hours, so probably within 24 hours actually, which is significantly more than was being achieved by NHS track and trace, which is clearly good. And if anything else, it underscores the importance of local. And that does matter. It really, really does matter. And all of the evidence tends to suggest that.
Thank you very much for that.
Any more questions? Okay, thank you, Greg. Thank you for the report. Thank you to you and your staff for all the good work that you're doing for the city. We have 5 recommendations, colleagues, on page 26. Are we all happy to agree those, please? Yes? Thank you. Thank you. Item 10 on the agenda is the domestic abuse funding from central government for specialist support for domestic abuse survivors, victims in safe accommodation. So we will just wait for our next speaker to arrive. Good afternoon. Thank you both for attending, Alison and Sam. It's good to see you here today. Domestic abuse is something that I'm quite keen to hear about this afternoon. It's something I was quite heavily involved in a previous life and previous profession. So we look forward to receiving the information in your report today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Afternoon, everybody. I think if I start just by briefly introducing the report, and then we can obviously take some questions about the detail if you need to. I'm assuming everyone can hear me okay. It's sounding quite odd to me sat here, but I've not been out of the house for about a year, so it's blowing my mind a little bit, I think, getting to the town hall after all this time. The Government's Domestic Abuse Act came into force just this year and introduced a lot of new requirements for local authorities and local areas to take on board in terms of local partnership boards and developing services, particularly around safe accommodation for victims of domestic abuse. So the report that you've got today to approve is essentially a kind of technical report, which is to accept some of the funding that the government's made available to every local authority to allow them to implement the new requirements that the new Domestic Abuse Act puts into place. In Sheffield, we're in a reasonably good position because most, if not all, of the requirements that are in the new Act are things that, as a city, we already do, and as a council, we already have services that are in place that meet a lot of the requirements of the Act. So we already spend, I think, something like 1.8 million, and £500,000 of that is on safe accommodation for people fleeing domestic abuse, both women and some men. So we have a really good foundation with a really good, strong partnership that I chaired the board this morning for that. Alison was there, and we have partners from health, from the police, from the criminal justice system, and the voluntary sector have now joined as well as of this last meeting today. So we've got really good foundations to build on, and so the funding that we've received for the new burdens will go in many cases towards strengthening some of the existing infrastructure that we've got, both in terms of protected refuge provision, plus some of the newer supported dispersed accommodation that we've got for victims that we set up over the lockdown period. The ask of today is to approve the acceptance of that funding and to broadly spend it on according to the plan that is set out briefly in the report. It's worth me saying that the other requirements of the Act, one of which is for a local area to produce a new needs assessment and to produce a strategy which will set out for government how we're intending to meet the requirements of the Act. We already have a long-standing domestic abuse and sexual abuse strategy in the city, which is due for renewal next year anyway. So what we'll be proposing to do is spend this year's worth of money which the government's given us, and then we'll obviously be coming back to the executive in a future meeting with the more wider strategy that would be for the next few years, and these new services will obviously perform an important part of that.
Thank you. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. It's good to see some new money going into domestic abuse services, and as I said to you the other day, Alison, you know, I worked with you on the last strategy and also in the run-up to this bill as well, so I'm pleased to see it. My question to you is this sufficient to support services at the moment, given the additional pressure which has come, the additional, you know, the increase in domestic abuse as a result of COVID?
I'll let Alison answer in her own right in a second, I guess, Councillor, but I think the world of domestic abuse, we've had increased demand through lockdown, as you know, people have seen the Health and Wellbeing Board reports, which we contributed to, and there's certainly been pressure on families and individuals as a result of the pandemic and the lockdown. I think if you were to ask me and Alison personally, we would always say, no, we could always do with more resources, and as a city, we would always be looking out for new resources, because we can't offer every woman or man a refuge place, and you know, not everyone would want it, but we're certainly going some way towards meeting some of that additional demand, both with the stuff that we've already done and with the additional funding. The extra funding that the government's giving is specifically around the safe accommodation side of the wider strategy, but we obviously also have advocacy services and outreach services and the helpline and things like that as well. And I guess, yeah, I think Alison will probably agree we could always do with more, but this does go some way towards helping us meet some of our, you know, some of the requirements that we have and some of the needs of the most vulnerable people in the city.
Just to add then, one of the things that wasn't in the Act that was lobbied for was around a statutory requirement to have community-based services, and the government decided not to do that and decided not to therefore fund, you know, to give funding to local authorities for community-based services. However, we have had, working closely with the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, there is money coming through from the Ministry of Justice and also from the Home Office. So we've just, I think, Catherine said 220,000 that's coming into the city in the latest round of Ministry of Justice funding, which is going to help us set up complex needs IDFAs, who are the specialist domestic abuse support worker roles, who will be able to have reduced caseloads in order to work with the really kind of stuck cases or the cases that are finding it really hard to engage with services. But in terms of this particular funding, I think the bit that gives us the most opportunity really is that we're able to spend some of it on increasing our sanctuary provision and the support that goes with the sanctuary provision. So that's target hardening for people's in their own homes. So that means that people who don't want to come into a refuge, and a lot of people don't, or it's an issue with an ex-partner or a family member, then we can provide more support to them in their own homes to enable them to stay safe, which obviously has benefits for the council in lots of other ways as well further down the line. So, but as Sam said, we are doing the needs assessment right this minute, so if it looks like we've got a big gap, that's something we're going to try and address in the strategy update.
Thank you for that. It's absolutely appalling that, you know, we have to sit and discuss this, but I'm really pleased to hear that we're putting services in place to meet those needs. Thank you.
I have questions from Councillor Teal and then Councillor Dunn.
Thank you, Chair. This might be a bit unfair because you probably haven't had time to digest the information, but I noticed there was a public consultation started in April, and their stakeholder event on June the 10th, so not long ago. I don't know if you've learnt anything, if you could give us sort of any anecdotal information from that. Thank you.
Yeah, we are analysing the stakeholder returns at the moment. So we had some quite mixed responses. So it's really trying to understand those responses. But we've got some really useful stuff in terms of what do you think we should be our priorities in terms of spending new funding. And certainly from what I can remember, it was things like needing support to go to court, actually, which isn't covered by this funding. But I think that, you know, that indicates that there's a problem with the criminal justice system, which certainly over COVID, I mean, has definitely deteriorated in terms of court. But we do commission our main provider, IDAS, to... our main provider of community-based services, IDAS, to support people in court. So we'll be looking at how that needs to get up and running again in this next recovery period. And in terms of other issues that were raised, support for children was a really big one. And luckily, this funding does allow us to put extra resources into the refuges, and also we're going to vary the contract of Haven, the provider in the city that works with children and young people affected by domestic abuse, so that we can increase the funding that goes to them, because they're a very, very well utilised service, and they've got a long waiting list at the moment. So luckily we're able to use this money to help with that, and that definitely seemed to be what the service users and people in the city wanted. In terms of other stakeholders, there's a whole long list of stuff that we went through this morning, isn't there? But one of the issues we need to look at is the impact of COVID evictions, but also Brexit as well, in terms of no recourse to public funds. So those are some of the things we're going to have to do some more work on.
Yeah, thank you. That's really interesting. Maybe you could use some of that PCC money for the court gap or something like that. But yeah, my portfolio has got community safety in it, so I'd really appreciate learning more about this. I might organise a briefing. Thank you. Thanks.
Councillor Dunn.
Thank you, and thank you both for all the work that you've done. You touched on it briefly, Alison, then about the increased support for children. You won't be surprised that that's what I was going to ask about. So very close to my heart from many, many years ago. But how are you linking that with all the community well-being that is going off in the schools? Because we know that the emotional support that many of our young people have it's skyrocketed. So it's really important that we're linking those together. So again, we shouldn't have to be discussing this, and we certainly shouldn't have to be using money from there. It should automatically have gone into our communities, because quite often it's the children, isn't it, that the schools notice there's an issue, and then often that can help. Rather than it be a crisis leave, it can be a managed leave from abuse. So it was really, you've touched on it with the work with Haven, but more so with all the counselling and all that early support that we do through Door 43, and how can we increase that, absolutely rightly, in our communities, because that's where it's needed first.
Really good question. Dan White, from who used to be Sheffield Futures, now the council, was at our meeting this morning, and we want to link up with him in order to see whether there's opportunities for match funding in terms of the potentially group work, in terms of healthy relationships education, in terms of prevention. But also we're aware that there's a counselling service provided by Futures. And so we're starting to talk to the CCG and Futures about whether some of the money that we've got can actually be used to bolster that service in order to make it an even more all-encompassing service and meet the needs of domestic and sexual abuse specifically. A couple of years ago we launched Operation Encompass in Sheffield, so that was a really good development. And in terms of the Haven recommissioning, they actually do go into schools and provide training for schools, and we are working with social care colleagues in order to look at recommissioning them jointly. So we are trying to join up as much as we possibly can, and but there are also initiatives like the Violence Reduction Unit have been doing some initiatives with schools around bystander work, so we're involved in that as well in terms of linking in with that, and that's been a bit on hold, I think, because of COVID, but I'm hoping that we'll see that get going again soon.
Councillor Linda Hammond.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make some brief comments, really. Just firstly to thank you both and the team for the work that's gone into this. I'm sure many of us in this room will have, to some extent, followed the progress of what was the Domestic Abuse Bill, now the Domestic Abuse Act. I would say two things about that. Firstly, it did take a long time. It technically fell at least once, possibly twice, due to parliamentary recesses. But what I would say, and I think something we're going to learn from here as we go forward, is that it represented, fairly rarely in the recent time of Parliament, I would argue, quite a positive process of MPs from different parties working together and actually focusing on an issue which, yes, it's far too late to bring this kind of legislation forward. Clearly, there should have been this money and these powers a long time ago, but actually MPs acting, I would argue, quite in the public interest and getting to a decent position. I think the new burdens that this act now brings is welcomed, and in terms of questions around money, I mean, as Councillor Petoni reflecting, it's always a difficult one to talk about. Is it sufficient? Is it whatever? Because I think that it's not just about sufficiency in terms of services and people coming to our door about to request those services. It's also about how do we have enough funding. That's something we have definitely enough funding. It's how to try and tackle the drivers behind what all violence in society, particularly violence against women and girls. The funding and the action that there never seems to be enough money to tackle those core causes, and perhaps as a society we struggle to find the levers to try and tackle that as an issue. But this is a good amount of money to do the specific things that we ask, and I think I'd love to bring it here, hopefully, or to a similar form towards this plan of how we're going to commission these services in more detail, because this is a technical report, it's great, but it's going to be much more interesting to see the things here, but also laid alongside the other things that come from this service, but also the other really, really important services that we as a council provide to citizens at risk or are survivors of domestic abuse, that don't necessarily come through this budget, because actually that is something that's thanks to the Home Office, other parts of the council, advice and support. So I think one thing I'm going to work with officers over the summer, and love to get other people involved as well, is how we can have a kind of narrative of everything we do, not in a huge long strategy way, but actually trying to bring together different things we do and other people do to try and provide more clarity in the face of this for what is happening. And just the final thing I'd say, and I want to be positive about the bill and the Act process, but the burdens that this gives us are significant. And yes, we can have an argument today about exactly the amount of money you've got tomorrow, but the government, yet again, is not providing long-term sustainable funding. We hope that more funding will come forward, of course we do, and in a sense we have to act on the basis that it will, because we can't just do nothing. If the burdens that they place deserve much longer-term funding solutions, and I think this is something we need to be arguing for, and it is yet again disappointing from this government that with one hand they do something quite good to work with us, but they are not prepared to trust local authorities to really invest in the long term to tackle the core of these issues. And we will do some good commissioning here, we really will, and working all together we will, but I think we could commission better, we could commission more strongly if the government worked with us to give that longer term funding guarantee. Thank you, and thank you again for all the work on this.
Any further questions? Just leaves me to say thank you for you both for coming in today. It's really appreciated. It is a good piece of work, and I'm sure we'll all be following it very, very closely. We have 5 recommendations, colleagues, which are on page 48 of the supplement. Are we all happy to agree those, please? Thank you. Thank you both very much for coming today. That moves us on to item 11 on the agenda, which is the European Social Fund Advance SCR, and we will just wait for our next presenter to arrive. Good afternoon, Kevin. Thank you for attending this afternoon. Good to see you again. And you're presenting to us on item 11 this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The first of the reports I brought today is about the European Social Funding funded Advance SCR. The purpose of the report is to seek approval to accept £640,000 circa of project funding from the ESF fund via the Department for Work and Pensions in partnership with Doncaster Borough Council, and to provide approximately £470,000 of match funding to operate the Advanced SCR programme on behalf of our council. The programme itself is intended to work with over 750 participants from a range of ages and backgrounds and initial skills level. We hope to create over 350 accredited outcomes from that group of people, but also improved workplace transferable skills for all participants, and also enhancing labour market skills for particularly low-paid and vulnerable people, and we intend that to be about 150 participants. I would stress these are minimum targets, and we expect to do a great deal more than that within the project funding. So the recommendations are that the Council accept the European Social Fund grant for approximately £640,000 and match that with £470,000 of our own money. Sheffield City Council will act as a delivery partner to Doncaster Borough Council, who are the lead authority for this project, and that we develop and utilise appropriate procurement strategies as we need them to deliver and develop this particular programme locally. Advance SCR is built upon the successful Advance Doncaster that has been running for about 3 years. Advance Doncaster was highly successful by providing high quality careers, employment information, advice and guidance from an impartial source to both individuals and to organisations. It was enabled to align to employer priorities, succession planning, provision support for employees and redundancy support for employees where required. It also assisted businesses to navigate the complex landscape that the skills support is like, avoiding sales pressures from organisations and with a pure focus on people and increased productivity for business. So it was absolutely independent. And this knowledgeable and fully impartial service provided a one-stop approach to support businesses and people to grow and develop independently. The basic plan around the project is that we will employ a number of employment and skills brokers, our own staff, who will work with businesses to carry out an in-depth skills audit of the organisation and provide them with information and guidance to access the correct training for both their businesses and for individuals within their business as well. So it's providing a really important service. Doncaster Borough Council will be acting as the lead authority, but we will also be working with Barnsley Metropolitan Borough Council, Doncaster Chamber of Commerce and ourselves to create a really coherent regional offer as well, and to make sure that it has that regional strategic fit with all that we are doing. We were not required to carry out any specific in-depth consultation, but we did work with businesses and with the Chamber of Commerce in Sheffield to look at this concept and agree that this was clearly a way forward. An equalities impact assessment was carried out, and this highlighted that the proposal seeks to support people who are traditionally excluded from the labour market, who struggle to make their way in business, by increasing their skills level and through that in itself, increasing their employability over time. Excuse me. The alternative options were, the only alternative option considered was to not accept the funding and not to draw down the funding, which of course would have left a gap in this particular area in terms of provision, both in Sheffield and across the region. So I ask you to consider this recommendation for the following reasons. It'll increase the skills levels for Sheffield in-work residents by streamlining access to skills required to support post-pandemic growth options for both the individual and the organisation. It will certainly help people avoid unemployment and move from unemployment to work if that particular situation should occur. And it will, of course, create a revenue stream which we can use to carry out this important piece of work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Has anyone got any questions? Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Kevin. I was just wondering if you could just tell us what the accredited outcomes are. You said there'd be 350 accredited outcomes. What does that mean in plain English?
We expect it to be a mix of English, mathematics, digital skills, but any specific qualifications that individuals need to improve in the workplace, and that could be a full range of activity. One of the things where SURE, and we've already done some market research on, is that we'll be working in the care sector for SURE with this, developing entry-level care qualifications so that people can move into the sector, but also maintain that job in the sector and move forward with their particular career choice.
Right, okay, yeah, so it's like 350 qualifications.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that's useful. The other thing I wasn't entirely clear about was the 460,000 that comes from match funding. Where does that come from? Out of which budget of the council or whatever?
It's primarily human resource, so it's the team from within employment and skills who will do the brokerage work. We'll recruit a few people, but a lot of that match is from our own staff who are already doing this kind of work.
Right, okay. So
and of course, a portion of my time and other management's time.
So of that, do you know how much cash we pay out towards this project?
Sorry,
do you know how much cash we pay out towards this project?
It's very little in this particular project. So, not a great deal.
That's useful. And the final question is, when you talk about the revenue coming into the council, what's that a reference to? Or is it the reference to the grant from...
It was a reference to the grant funding and the fact that we will have that available to deliver the project.
Right. Great. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Dunn. Councillor Turpin.
Thanks. We could just argue about who's the most polite. Kevin, thanks very much for getting this through, and I know that it's been caught up in the last year's oddness. I'm really pleased. I think it's really good and really positive that we can upskill our people, our constituents, and the wider public of the city region as well. And just the other day, I was talking to a constituent of mine who made some bad decisions as a 14-year-old and left school without any qualifications, and now in the 30s are stuck in that cycle of minimum wage jobs. And I would say, you know, he's a perfectly intelligent person and capable of doing some good things. And so I really hope that we can not only help people with the higher end qualifications, but also to really give those people who fell through the gaps at some point, and perhaps not even through their own fault, and really help them, give them a leg up and make the most of themselves. So thanks for getting this through.
Thank you. Nice to see you, Kevin. A bit of a hobby horse of mine, as you, I'm going to go on now. How is this going to reach, building on Councillor Turpin's question, into our communities to make sure that the kids and the young people and people who are going to end up losing their jobs shortly when furlough ends, that if the people in Southey that we are, we are actually reaching out to them and actually finding them. You did a great piece with a young gentleman that I got in touch with you during the pandemic that had lost his job, and the family were completely didn't know where to go. And the work you did, thank you, because that family still email me now to say you've changed their life. So it's actually how do we do more of that, and how do we make sure? And working with Barnsley Doncaster, absolutely fine. Are we all equally accessing this, do you know? So it's kind of, when the more complex cases might need more money, is that being shared equally across all the three areas?
Thank you, Jane. I think it's very important that we place this project into the context of a continuum of learning and opportunity we have. We've fought really hard with Sheffield City Region to make sure that under the devolution of the adult education budget, that we didn't lose our ability to deliver foundation level learning in the community, and we really dug our heels in over that, and we won that argument that it can't all be about higher level skills without being able to bring people through their learning experience and develop those skills in a scaffolded and layered way to make sure that they can get into a job. So the AEB was an extremely important battle we had to win and make sure that that devolution did not take the attention away from that community work that our FACES service do, and that will continue to do that. And in the future years, that'll be much more focused work around working with communities in need and individuals in need, rather than a blanket approach across the city. But also we have a project running right now called Pathways to Success and Pathways to Progression, which work with both young people and older people who are not in work, to make sure that they have those very basic work skills, but also that we have processes in place to overcome barriers to work. So one of the particular elements of that is built around debt management, so people are able to move forward with their lives without carrying debt with them. Also working on mental health and well-being. So it's those building block of very soft skills that enable people to believe that they can move into the labour market and get a job. So we see Advance as very much linked into that. So it's not replacing anything that's going on, but it has very strong transitional and interface links with all the other activity. So we are trying hard to create that continuum so we don't lose community engagement, which we value enormously because people need learning in the community, but also that we're able to meet employers' needs when people have a job so that they can keep that job, gain additional skills to enable them to progress in that job, and also move away from low-paid, low-skilled, vulnerable jobs as we move forward with the recovery.
Any more questions? Thank you very much, Kevin. I think this provides an excellent opportunity for people across the city who are, looking for work and to develop their skills. So thank you for putting it together. We have 4 recommendations, colleagues, to agree, which are on page 58 of the supplement, if you're all happy to agree those, please. Thank you. And I think you're on a roll, Kevin. You have item 12, which is the European Social Fund Advanced Digital.
Thank you, Chair. The next paper is indeed about the European Social Fund Advanced Digital Scheme. The purpose of the report is to seek approval to accept approximately £730,000 of grant funding from the ESF and to provide match funding of approximately £540,000 from Sheffield City Councils to provide our involvement in the Advanced Digital project. Barnsley Metropolitan Council are the accountable body for this project, with Sheffield City Council acting as the local delivery partner. Total participants we expect in this project are circa 800 minimum, all engaging in some level of digital development, with about 400 achieving accredited qualifications and outcomes from it, We're also looking at some specific target groups to develop a range of applicable digital skills, but also raising awareness of digital engagement with small businesses and looking how they can improve the skills of their own staff, as well as developing a digital footprint that will enable them to compete in the marketplace. So the recommendations are that Sheffield City Council accept the ESF grant of approximately £730,000, that we provide £550,000 of matched funding, and that we engage in a delivery partner agreement with Barnsley Metropolitan Council, and that we develop and utilise appropriate procurement strategies as we need to further move the project forward. I think the thing we've realised certainly over the year and a half that we've been engaged in the COVID pandemic is the absolute necessity for people to be digitally able and capable of using digital skills both at home and in the workplace. We've done quite a bit of research about this, and we've found that rapid technological change threatens about 47% of jobs in the city region due to automation and skills roles in the digital sector, and that the people who are likely to bear the brunt of job losses connected to that are employees who have got low skills and in the low-paid sector. 82% of online job applications require some level of digital skills, and the future workforce, we certainly know, will require higher level digital skills both to direct automation and interact with digital technologies. What we know about Sheffield is, and I can certainly vouch for this within the work I did both in the emergency food operation at the beginning of the pandemic, and then since then in digital learning, there are high levels of digital exclusion in our local communities. That's people not having the digital skills that they need to engage in digital learning or in the workplace. And whilst there are a lot of online courses available for people, the less digital skills you have, the less likely you are to be able to engage in those courses successfully. We've certainly found that a recent survey by Lloyds Bank, 53% of employees lack the digital skills they need for work, and only 34% of employees report that employers give them the digital skills support that they need to progress in the workplace. So this programme will create flexible packages of learning to meet individual people and organisations' need, and it will support a full range of digital skills that people may well need, from doing the very basic essential digital skills programme right up to level 3 skills in coding if that is indeed required. And we will also create, through information, advice and guidance, a progression pathway into higher level skills so that people can move from those basic skills in basic jobs to higher level skills in higher level jobs, which are certainly going to be more secure as we move forward to the future. So we'll be working with Barnsley Metropolitan Borough Council, but we will also be working on this project with Independent Training Services, a private training company, Sheffield Hallam University and the RNN College Group. And each delivery partner is responsible for providing elements of that according to their city needs. A quality impact assessment is being carried out, and it highlights once again that the proposal seeks to support people who would be traditionally excluded from the labour market by increasing their digital skills and therefore their employability and earning potential in the digital sectors. The only alternative option considered was not to draw down the money, and of course that would leave a gap in terms of developing our businesses and our citizens' digital skills. So by accepting this funding, the Council will be able to increase the skills level for the people of Sheffield, for out-of-work residents and for those in work, and create an access to a higher level of skills through that. It will also help tackle any unemployment in the future, as people will increase their skills, and it will, by the very act of accepting the funding, we will increase the revenue for the Council to work in this important area of development for our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone, any questions, please? Councillor Turpin.
Thanks very much. Thanks again, Kevin. Good work. It's nice to see that we can still get European money, although maybe it won't last much longer. And it really actually makes me feel quite sad that more wasn't made of this kind of thing, and perhaps 5 years ago the outcome of the referendum would have been different had people seen the value of it. I was going to ask you about the different levels of the digital skills, but you did explain. I think that's really interesting, that it's a really varied initiative from very basic skills to very high-level skills. And I just wanted to also ask you, what are the various ways to meet the people with this? So clearly you mentioned about employees, but will we also be able to access the unemployed, or is it just going to be going through businesses?
We certainly want to work with businesses because we see it important to help them upscale and meet the challenges in terms of digitalisation in the workplace. But we're linking this very closely into our Pathways project as well, where we are accessing individuals who are drawing down benefits, who are the furthest from the labour market, who we're working through that progression pathway using that Pathways project. So we see that very much as a conduit for people who are not in work. So part of the project is certainly working with businesses, but part of it is definitely working with our citizens who are not in work and who struggle to engage in work because of a lack of digital skills. We also intend to deliver some of this ourselves with our own EB budget linked into the FACES provision. We've trialled a year with the delivery of the Essential Digital Skills course, and that's been a highly successful year. So although we've got this money, we also have the EB budget, and some of that will in fact be aligned to the Pathways and aligned to creating digital opportunities for people who are not in work. So it really is an intention to create a pathway. Also, we see this leading into employment, where the Advanced SCR programme will also pick people up who've done this in the workplace and give them higher level skills through that project too. So we really want to link all of these 4 projects together along with our EB to create a strong continuum of adult education offer across the city, across whole strands of learning, but particularly with a focus on this digital aspect right now.
No more questions? I think just one comment from me. This is really timely from a point of view from for myself. With ward colleagues, I've been talking about digital inclusion and digital mapping across our ward just this morning. So this will be, I think, really interesting to look at how we can try and fit what we're doing into this programme. So from a personal perspective, that's very timely. So thank you very much for that. We do have 5 recommendations. They're on page 83 of our supplementary pack. Are we all happy to agree then? Lovely. Thank you very much. Keep up the good work, and thank you for your time this afternoon, Kevin. We move on to item 13 then, which is the Green Homes Grant Local Authority Delivery Scheme, and we will wait for our next presenter to come to the chamber. Good afternoon, Janet. Thank you for attending this afternoon. I understand you're the presenting officer for the Green Homes Grant and the Local Authority Delivery Scheme. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I hope the report is fairly self-explanatory. The purpose of the Green Homes Grant and the report I'm bringing to you this afternoon is to accept funding for a bid that was presented to government a few months ago. What the aim of the fund is to provide grant funding for the retrofitting, improving energy efficient measures and improving the warmth of homes of all tenures. So that is social housing as well as private homes in the city. However, the funding does have rules attached to it. And homes must be within the definition of what we would class some of our coldest homes in the city. And also the household income must be gross less than obviously £30,000 a year. And that is really to target obviously some of our most vulnerable individuals in the city and those obviously living in homes with, you know, solid walls and desperately in need of energy efficiency works. So what we did in March is we worked up proposals to look at how we could invest both in council homes and also in owner-occupied properties across the city, using as well the information that we hold in terms of, you know, our EPC ratings across the city and also to target some of those in the worst condition. And to bring forward proposals that would help improve a number of homes. So we provided the proposals, and I'm pleased to advise you that our funding proposals were approved and bring forward to you today to accept funding of about £3 million so we can invest in homes. What if we accept the funding, then obviously we will be the accountable body, obviously, for that funding and delivering those works. All of the works need to be completed in all homes by December, which is a very, very tight time scale, but we feel like confident that we could use this as the first opportunity to be investing in cold homes, and some of our poor quality homes, and also that will in turn lead the way to be applying for more significant funding from government to be able to invest in the city. So in total, we are proposing to improve 502 council homes, 15 housing association homes, where they have a type of property that we need to identify a design solution for, particularly those Victorian homes, and 265 private homes. So there are a number of recommendations in the report that I'm seeking approval from you today, if you agree with the proposals. And also we hope that you will see that, you know, that these funds will help us on the journey to improve the thermal efficiency and the quality of our homes in the city, and the council's obviously commitment to climate change and net zero. What I would like to do, however, that's not included in the report is add an additional recommendation, if that is okay. And the recommendation I would like to add is, in recognition of the many vulnerable households who own their own home and would benefit from these works, to use best endeavours to identify those vulnerable households and encourage them to apply for the grant support in the first instance. And obviously we would then use this as part of our marketing strategy for the programme to ensure that we target some of our most vulnerable and some of our poorest properties. So nothing really further to add. Hope the report is fairly self-explanatory and happy to pick up any questions.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor MacDonald, please.
Obviously, it's really good news but it's a sort of drop in the ocean, really, in terms of what we need, particularly in terms of the poor state of private sector housing and how we need to respond to climate change and so on with our housing and retrofitting and so on. Any indication yet from government about any significant funding which is likely to be become available to address these pressing needs, both in terms of the individuals that are living in the accommodation and also in terms of the impact of that on the climate?
Yes, certainly. So one of the things about this funding, it's very, very tight. And, you know, a few months you've got to deliver the works. But we have been made aware since the writing of the report that there is to be a LAD 3, and we assume that there might well be a LAD 4 and 5 and 6, so that we can start to plan our programme. And I think we use this first scheme of works to make sure that we understand the systems, the processes we need in place, how to engage with our communities for those homes, and so we can measure the sorts of money that we are going to need in the areas that we are going to need it. And I think that's quite powerful for us to be able then to be clear on our ask of government of what the city needs. We're also aware that they will be announcing, we are advised, a further social decarbonisation fund, which it could be quite significant. But what we are finding is there is a number of types of projects that are around at the moment that come with light funding, and what our aim is to tap into anything that will enable us to realise some investment for the city and improve homes, and particularly those that are pretty cold.
Thank you for that. So it sounds like, this is, Eugene will laugh at this, one of my favourite phrases is strategic opportunism, that we have a clear view of where we want to go and what we need to do it, and then we have to be a bit opportunistic in terms of the available funding to do that. So that I'm in favour of that. But the other thing I was just about to ask about, so it's really important that we actually systematically record the learning from these early exercises to strengthen our ability to attract significant funding to the city.
Councillor Johnson?
Thank you. I'm just really pleased that this funding has come through. I kind of feel we've been banging on about the need to insulate homes for years, and it's really good to see something definite coming in. Actually, money coming in from government, because, as Kate says, it's a drop in the ocean for the number of houses they've got, but it's still £3 million, so good. So yeah, very pleased about that. I mean, it just ticks all the boxes in terms of, you know, reducing people's bills, improving their health, because there's nothing worse than older people living in cold homes, and all the climate change effect as well. So that's really, really good on all those. Thanks about the extra recommendation there. That is the really important thing to do. So I've flagged this up before, and I meant to get back to you yesterday, didn't. I think it is still worth taking out the line in paragraph 4.4 that I identified. And simply, it is this equalities point. I think it does work with what you've suggested there. And it's really just to make sure that we as a council don't tie ourselves down to something that is fundamentally, you know, unequal. And I mean, you missed the last item here where we had Given Thrawn talking about, you know, the need for the really big impact of digital access. As soon as you have any sort of grant application process that's done on a first come, first served basis, it is, you know, going to be and there's quite a number of people who might be sort of, you know, fairly, income poor, but capital rich, people in big houses who, you know, can get in the door far beyond, you know, far more quickly than, you know, the old Bangladeshi couple in Darnell. And we want to make sure that there is that fair thing. So that sort of using the contacts to the best endeavours to get those people out, because they're the ones that really makes a difference. And if we just take out the line, so it's actually in paragraph 4.4, so section 4.4, the last paragraph there, and it's the second sentence. I just propose we delete that. It's the sentence that says, in addition to ensure fairness, in the event of oversubscription, this present entitlement should become on a first come, first served basis. based on the date and time the application is received. I think if we have that, it just ties us down to some decision-making based on inequality. So if we delete that, couple it with the extra thing that you recommended, which definitely support, then I'd like to see that happen. That'd be great.
Can I just intervene there? Personally, I don't think that it would be very wise. I think it leaves the council in a rather vulnerable position in terms of exactly where we are in relation to policy. I don't see how it makes us unequal if we are leaving that particular paragraph in. The document has been out in the public domain now for over the last 7 days. The recommendations that we are working to as a council are the recommendations and not the narrative of the document. So I think it's probably too late in terms of having any value in removing the sentence at this moment in time, if I'm being honest.
Could I come back? I was only picking it up because it's actually talking about change the formal wording of a policy. So if it was in the narrative of the report, then probably wouldn't worry too much, because I think we know the sentiment, what it's about. But because it is a proposal to change the written policy, and on the assumption that any grant applications have to be done in accordance with our published policies, the difficulty is that it would tie our hands, and it would probably leave us more open to challenge if we then found people who are really in need and gave them the grants instead, and that would be my concern, really. So I think there is value in that, and I don't think there's any particular downside.
I think the need is the need, not the more in need, but I think I would welcome a comment from Gillian Duckworth, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, the report's the officer's report, so we wouldn't delete any wording from the officer's report. What you would need to do is add in any additional recommendation that you might want to do, but that's something that you'll need to vote on as a committee as to whether you want to add in any additional recommendations. I think the officer has suggested the addition of the paragraph, in recognition of the many vulnerable households who own their home and will benefit from these works, to use best endeavours to identify those households and encourage them to apply for grant support. So I think the officer has suggested that that's added in as a recommendation. So it's up to you, Chair, as to whether you want to vote on that, accept that, or propose anything additional.
My recommendation from the Chair would be that we take this recommendation, because that sets out quite clearly how we will deal with people, and we will be pointing any applicants who were unsatisfied with the process to that recommendation in terms of how they had been dealt with, as opposed to the narrative of the document. So I will be happy to just take a vote on the additional recommendation as given to us by Janet this afternoon. Councillor Turpin, Councillor Dunn, and Councillor Johnson.
Thanks very much. I do agree with Councillor Johnson that this does, I would say, inadvertently write in inequality into the report. And I keep thinking, you know, you've got the semi-retired couple in a 6-bedroom house in Broom Hill, and then you've got the single dad of 4 in Gleadless who's working on a building site on minimum wage, and they were both equally eligible, yet clearly the semi-retired couple in a large house who may have been former professionals are going to be more equipped to apply for the grants, and then which of course they could apply on day one because they've got the time and the wherewithal, and then they will be ahead of the person who you could argue is in greater need. So what I would just like to say is that I think we need to be guarded of this. If we go on to the subsequent LAD funding, you know, if we are in a position where we can't remove that from this report, we should ensure it doesn't appear in future schemes. Thanks.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but that's the idea of the recommendation, to make sure that we've covered that precise point off that you've just raised. Councillor Dunn.
Thank you, Chair. Now, I just wanted to support what you proposed, Councillor Grocott, and say that is covered in the recommendation. So, yeah, thank you.
Councillor Johnson?
Yes, thank you. I was just looking at what Jill Duckworth said. That's quite helpful. I mean, I think there's no problem, surely, with the recommendation that Janet's put forward. I think we all support that. I just want to make sure that you don't end up in the sort of fairly ludicrous situation where you do good work encouraging people to apply, and then they do apply, but they're still not ahead of the people who in the 6-bedroom house who've got their application in on day one already. Because it's actually in, so recommendation 11 here is where we're formally being asked to amend the private sector housing assistance policy to include the green, as detailed in this report and set out in Appendix 1. So that's where it ties in the wording in the report there specifically. So I just wondered if, and I think take Jill Duckworth's advice that you can't delete something that's in the report as opposed to the recommendations, but whether we can just add on a rider to that, saying that officers should have discretion to override that in circumstances to promote equality. And I know that it allows a bit of a fudge room, but actually I think that is the point. I think we all agree in this room that it is really important that the people who've got the most need and where this grant will have the most impact should get the grants in preference to people who have less need. Again, maybe Jill can help with some words there, but some sort of rider like that.
Thank you, Councillor Douglas. Councillor Johnson, sorry. I hear what you're saying, and my concern really is that by adding in a discretion, it raises more challenge or potential for challenge. I know it seems quite harsh and quite rigid, but we have got limited funds here, and we know we will get a lot of applications, and we have to be as transparent in the way that we deal with them as possible. And if we add an element of officer discretion into it, I feel that perhaps would open us up to more challenge than us sticking to what we've currently got. So I would not. I mean, it's up to you, Chair, but I would not recommend that an officer discretion goes into the policy.
My recommendation is going to be that we leave the document as is, for the reasons I've already explained, and in light of the advice that we've had from Gillian, and that we add recommendation 13 to that. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to support that, but I'd also like to remind colleagues that this is the first step in what is a major programme, and I would personally like to know what we could learn from that, and if we find that we're finding it hard to reach the people who most need this sort of support, then we can improve the way that we use the next programmes and opportunities as well, because nobody wants to create inequalities, and to be honest, I felt some of the contrasts that were being made by two of my colleagues were actually sort of quite extreme, to be honest. But let's try and learn from this project, from this introductory one. And if there is an issue about that we need to tackle, then I would suggest that we would all want to tackle it. And I support your recommendation to us, Chair.
Councillor Teal.
Thank you, Chair. I just want a clarification on, are we adding the part about encouraging people to apply to the policy? And if we're adding that to the policy, do we also then need to state some sort of mechanism for how that would take place? Again, it starts to get really grey, doesn't it? And I appreciate that the element of discretion is problematic if it's not spelt out very clearly. And so I've got concerns around that now. So if someone can clarify, that would be good. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It's an additional recommendation on the report. So then that will need to be implemented by officers in a way that, as you say, that doesn't have any ambiguity.
Sorry, any more comments? Okay, we have...
So I'm just thinking how to wrap this up to express the point we're doing here. I mean, I'm concerned that we really don't want to be allocating grants on a first-come, first-served basis, which is what we're doing. And I fully appreciate the difficulty about discretion. The advantage of this rule is that it's very easy. It's absolutely clear that grants will be handed out in the order in which the applications come in. But actually, it would be a bad thing for us to do that. So I'm just going to suggest as an additional recommendation with 11 that it's done, but with the deletion of the sentence containing the words first come, first served in the report.
So you are still wanting to delete something from the report?
Sorry, I was putting in a recommendation, so in addition to recommendation 11. It's just that proviso on amending the formal policy.
I'm not clear about what you are wanting us to do. I'm sorry.
Okay, so on paragraph 11 of the recommendation, that says private sector housing assistance policy be amended to include the Green Homes grant as detailed in this report and set out in Appendix 1 to add on subject to the deletion of the sentence containing the words first come, first served in the appendix. Sorry, no, in the report. Which has the effect, in short, of taking out those words, but brings it into the recommendations, because I take on point Jill's point there about what we actually have to resolve.
I think what Councillor Johnson's asking for is a proposed amendment to the Appendix 1 policy. To delete, it refers on in paragraph 16.4 on the policy to applications to be made on first come first served basis. So I think it's whether if that's moved and seconded and voted on as to whether you want to have that as an additional recommendation that clause 16.4 of the policy set out at Appendix 1 is deleted or is amended by deleting the words applications will be on a first come first served basis.
Sorry, Councillor Johnson, can I just check something? Is what you're proposing deletion of the whole of paragraph 16.4 or just the subclause applications will be on a first come first served basis?
Well, actually, it's simplest to delete the whole 16.4 because that has the effect that we're trying to get round.
Yeah, so I think it's the deletion of the whole of 16.4, so that would be a motion take forward to make the amendment or have an additional recommendation to do that. So, Chair, if you just want to see whether that's moved, seconded and voted on.
The easiest way to do this is we have the additional recommendation 13, which Janet has already provided us with, and then we have an additional recommendation at 14, which effectively says to delete recommendation policy point 16.4. Have I got that?
Yeah, I think if you amend 11 by adding to the end of 11 of clause 11, except clause 16.4, which will be deleted. I think that addresses it, but Abby can always tidy up the wording.
Okay, thank you. So we have the original recommendations 1 to 10 and 12. Can we all agree all of those, please? Thank you. We have recommendation 13. Do we want to agree those? That. And then we have recommendation 11, which now has on the end of it, except clause 16.4 in the Appendix 1 document. All those in...
Surely, Chair, you have to take the amendment separately, and then we can vote on the substantive recommendation.
Thank you. Yeah. So, Douglas, you are proposing the amendment? Yes. Thank you, Councillor Turpin. Those in favour of the amendment, please show. That's 3. Those against? That's 4. The motion is lost. The amendment is lost. So we then move to the substantive motion, which is motion 11. All those in favour? Recommendation 11. Those against? Abstentions? Okay, we're all okay with that. Thank you. Thank you, Janet. I think we got there in the end. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is item 14, which is the capital approvals for the month 12 of 2021 and 1 of 21-22. And we just will await the presenting officer, Damien Watkinson. Good afternoon, Damien. Thank you for attending this afternoon. You're here to present the capital approvals, please.
Yep, that's correct. Thank you very much. There's 3 recommendations in the paper. It's to approve the regular monthly capital approvals and the associated procurement strategies and delegate any contract awards to the Director of Finance and Commercial Services. We've got Appendix 2, which is just really approving the accounting changes that are resulted from financial year end, which is the official slipping of budgets and recognition of accelerated expenditure, and that's contained in Appendix 2. And then Appendix 3, there's a recommendation to accept some Transforming Cities funding of approximately 1.9 million from the Sheffield City region, and to allow us to continue the development work on those schemes when that formal funding offer is received. The main body of the report is the Appendix 1, really, and they are the new additions and variations to the programme. I don't intend to go through them all one by one because we've got 2 months worth there after Cabinet being rescheduled from last month. So I'll just bring out the key ones, which are the Future High Streets Fund public realm works, approximately 8.8 million. So going out for procurement for those works at the bottom of Fargate, delivered with Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government funding, plus some of our own match funding. Also the Hemsworth Older Persons Independent Living Scheme, which is formalising £20 million to deliver 81 OPIL units on the former Hemsworth school site as part of the overall stock increase plan. There's also a scheme for £3 million to work on the council housing flat roof, tile block flat roofs to secure them, make them watertight, and look to installing solar PV where that is possible. And then we've also got several road safety projects coming forward as part of the budget amendment was approved last year, creating that road safety and congestion pot. So we've got several schemes like at Burton Street, Abbeydale and Rother Valley, where we're looking at the feasibility works are starting there to start delivery on those schemes. There's also a couple of schemes in the schools estate where we're looking to just rectify problems that are developing there from the condition grants that we get from schools. But yes, rather than run through each scheme one by one, they're the key highlights. And if anybody's got any queries on any particular schemes, I'll do my best to answer them or take those away to the individual officers involved.
Thank you. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Damien. There's lots of good news in this. Yeah, and we don't get that much these days. So thank you for the report, and I know all the hard work that's gone into actually putting the schemes together and compiling the report. I'm particularly pleased to see, from my ward's perspective, that to see that there was going to be feasibility in into the Sheaf Valley cycle route. Yay! So I'm really pleased to see that. And lots of other good news around the flat roofs and the tower blocks, and also the funding for the older persons independent living project in Hemsworth as well. So I think all of us can see a lot of good news in this, and everybody's obviously going to be pleased to see the future High Street Fund as well. So thank you for bringing us some good news. We can smile at this at a time when budgets are really, really tough for everybody at the moment. So thank you. So it's not a question, it's a comment.
Any more? You've clearly made everyone very happy. Thank you very much. That was job well done. 3 recommendations. Are we all happy to agree them, please? Keep up the good work, Damien, and thank you for coming in this afternoon. Item 15 is the Sheffield Olympic Legacy Park proposal for the lease for Cannon Park community area, and we'll just await Neil Jones, who's presenting that. Good afternoon, Neil. Thank you for attending this afternoon to talk about the Olympic Legacy Park. Can I just remind everyone, please, that there is some sensitive information in the Appendix 1 to this document. So if members want to discuss that, we do need to stop the recording. So if you could mention that before you speak, please. Thank you.
At the bottom, there it is, yep. Sorry. Yeah, afternoon everybody. So I'm not sure how much detail you've had a chance to read of the report. Essentially, this is about the Sheffield Olympic Legacy Park, so the former Don Valley Stadium site for people who aren't fully aware of it, and the next phase of development which is coming forward on the park. And this is essentially bringing back something that was originally in the vision for the park in the first place, which was a basketball arena, which was to be the home of Sheffield Sharks. That proved a little bit, took a bit of difficulty in actually funding that over the past few years. Last year, a different proposal was emerged whereby it's to be funded by Cannon Medical Systems, and they're going to, as well as the basketball arena, they are going to introduce a sports diagnostic imaging centre, which is essentially a research and diagnostic centre, as it suggests, and that will be helping to provide care and obviously the research that's needed into individuals' health. It's mainly aimed at sports people. It's not, but it will be open to all, and it's will be run by a organisation called Living Care, but they work closely with the NHS, so there will be opportunities. It's not a purely private healthcare system. So they'll be running the research centre. The Sharks, through their company Park Community Arena, they will operate the basketball centre, which will also be a leisure centre in addition to this. And so it'll be essentially the home for the Sharks, but there will also be other sports events held, other business events, exhibitions potentially, other community events, weddings. They're talking about potential Bollywood event. So it's a general leisure facility with the intention very clearly that whatever goes on there doesn't compete with facilities that the council is already running, whether it's at the arena or the City Hall or elsewhere on the Olympic Legacy Park, and it enhances that facility that the events offer. So the building itself will be funded, built and held on a long lease by Canon Medical Systems, with underleases of the arena goes to PCA, and the research centre is operated by Living Care. It's a off-market deal, so this hasn't been marketed. It's something which we think is strategically important, and so it fits with the policies that allow us to do off-market deals. It's been negotiated at a price which is open market value, despite the fact that the lease has got restrictions in it. So we think it's a very good deal financially, and it should be. So they've got planning permission, should be on site if we can get this approved. We're working on the lease agreement at the moment. They should be on site within the next couple of months and open for next summer. Any questions? Happy to answer.
Thank you very much. A couple of weeks ago now, I went down with Councillor Fox. We had a good look around the Olympic Legacy Park. To quote Councillor MacDonald, this is another good news story. Lots of great work going on there. So, really good agenda item to sort of finish the day on. And I suppose I also ought to declare that I'm a huge basketball fan and do love to go down there and watch the Sharks. So it'll be great to see them in the new home. So enough from me. Anyone got any questions? Councillor Dunn?
Yeah, as a comment, just absolutely so exciting. Just think it's just amazing, and I really like the idea that we're having these great kind of iconic things that are going to be around the city and not all centred in one area. So this is about kind of spreading it and making a city for everyone. So it's really exciting. I just wish there was a bit more yoga, because that's about my bit at the moment, but kind of, so can we do something like that just for me? I'm only joking. Really good for wellness, everything, but really, really exciting, and I think it's absolutely amazing and well done, and I think it's going to really help put Sheffield even more on the map as a city where everyone wants to be. Thanks.
Just for the avoidance of doubt, I only go and watch the basketball. I am nowhere near tall enough. Any more questions? Okay, we have two recommendations on the original paper. Are we all happy to agree them? I have one recommendation on the appendix. If anyone wants to comment before we vote, I will need to turn the recording off. Or do I need to turn it off for the vote? Are we all happy to agree the recommendation on the appendix as well? Brilliant. Thank you all very much. That was a short and sweet paper, but with lots of good news. And that's the meeting at an end. Thank you all for attending today, members, officers. Good to see you all here in the town hall. And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you.